Every night, my bedroom in North Dakota seemed to get smaller. At first it was just a feeling, a subtle sense of the walls closing in, the kind you dismiss as exhaustion or a trick of the light. But this feeling didn't go away. It lingered, growing stronger with each passing night, like a low hum you can't quite place, but can't ignore either. So, I decided to do something about it. I went out and bought a heavy-duty tape measure, the kind contractors use. I felt a bit ridiculous, but I had to know if I was losing my mind. That evening, armed with my tape measure and a healthy dose of skepticism, I got to work. I measured the room from wall to wall, floor to ceiling, jotting down the numbers in a small black notebook. The north wall to the south wall was exactly 12 feet, the east wall to the west was 10 feet, the ceiling height was a standard 8 feet. Solid, reassuring numbers. I wrote them down, clicked my pen, and told myself that was the end of it. I'd proven to myself it was all in my head. With a sigh of relief, I went to sleep, the notebook and tape measure on my nightstand like a talisman against my own paranoia. The next morning, I woke up with that same uneasy feeling. The air felt thicker, the space more confined. My heart started to pound. I grabbed the notebook and the tape measure. My hands were shaking slightly as I stretched the metal tape across the room again. North wall to south wall. 11 feet, 11 inches, I measured again and again. The result was the same. An inch. It was just 1 inch, but it was an inch that shouldn't have disappeared. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I checked the other dimension. East to west was now 9 feet, 11 inches. Another inch, gone. My breath caught in my throat. I looked up at the ceiling. It felt closer. I scrambled onto my bed and stretched the tape up. 7 feet, 11 inches. The floor felt higher too. But that was impossible, right? Floors and ceilings don't just move. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, trying to rationalize it. Maybe the house was settling, but a full inch overnight, on every surface. That didn't make any sense. I live in North Dakota. Things are built to withstand the elements, not to just shrink. I thought about telling someone, my friend Sarah, maybe my brother. But what would I say? Hey, I think my bedroom is eating itself. They'd think I was crazy. They'd probably be right. So I kept it to myself, deciding to measure again the next night, hoping, praying, that I'd made a mistake. Night came, and the dread came with it. I went through the same ritual, measuring every dimension of the room before I allowed myself to get into bed. The numbers were unchanged from my morning measurement. I left the tape measure out, extended across the floor from one wall to the other, a silent sentinel. I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside, sounded like the groaning of wood and plaster being pulled inward. I tossed and turned, my eyes darting around the dark, trying to see the movement I was certain was happening. The next morning, the first thing I saw was the tape measure. It was buckled, pushed up in the middle like a tiny metal hill. The wall had moved. I didn't even need to read the numbers to know. The room was now 11 feet, 10 inches wide. Another inch vanished into thin air. The ceiling was lower. The floor was higher. The room wasn't just settling. It wasn't a hallucination. It was shrinking. And it was happening with a terrifying, deliberate precision. It wasn't a violent collapse. There was no cracking plaster, no splintering wood. It was a silent, creeping constriction. The walls were smooth, the paint unblemished. The house itself was perfectly quiet. It was closing in on me, carefully. Days bled into a week. Every single morning, I woke up to a smaller room, an inch from each wall, an inch from the ceiling, an inch from the floor. The ritual became my life. Wake up, see the buckled tape, measure, record the new, smaller numbers, and spend the day in a state of quiet panic. My 12 by 10 room was becoming a 10 by 8 room. The ceiling, once comfortably high, was now low enough that if I stood on my toes, I could brush it with my fingertips. The world outside my bedroom window seemed to recede, becoming a smaller and smaller square of reality. I started to adapt in strange ways. I had to move my furniture. First I pushed my dresser flush against the wall, but soon the room was too narrow, and I had to drag it out into the hallway. Then my bookshelf had to go. My comfortable armchair followed. Soon my bedroom contained only my bed, wedged tightly between the encroaching walls. Getting out of bed meant shimmying sideways, my back and stomach brushing against the cool plaster. My movements became small, economical. I learned to live within the shrinking confines. The act of stretching my arms out wide became a distant memory, a luxury I could no longer afford. The outside world started to feel alien. The expansive plains of North Dakota, the vast open sky, it all felt overwhelming, too large. I found myself retreating to my room, the one place I should have been terrified of. It was becoming my whole world, a world that was being tailored just for me. The constant pressure, The quiet, inexorable squeeze was becoming familiar. It was a strange comfort, in a way. The universe was too big, too chaotic, but my room had a purpose. It had a direction. One night, the space was so tight that I couldn't fully extend my legs in bed. My knees were bent, my feet pressed against the wall. I lay there, listening to the silence, feeling the imperceptible movement. The ceiling was just inches from my face. I could feel the texture of the plaster with my breath. My arms were pinned to my sides. I couldn't stretch. I couldn't roll over. I was held, contained. The panic I had felt for weeks was gone, replaced by a strange sense of calm, of acceptance. It was almost over. And then, I heard it. It wasn't a voice in my head, and it wasn't a sound from outside. It was the room itself. A whisper that seemed to come from the very air, from the plaster, from the space that was no longer there. It was a soft, sibilant sound, a breath of dust and stillness. It was a voice of finality, of satisfaction, and it said just 2 words: perfect fit. And in that moment, held tight in the embrace of my bedroom, I realized it was right. I finally fit, and the room stopped shrinking. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more.